Howdy gamers, in this video I'm going to be going over why to run the runes that are good on Yasuo. The runes are really simple for Yasuo, actually. The two options that you really have are Conquer and Fleet of Footwork. Conquer with the Resolve Tree secondary, and then Fleet of Footwork with the Domination Tree secondary. And you could also run the Domination Tree secondary on Conquer. But simply put, the only distinguishing thing of whether you want to run Conquer or Fleet of Footwork is if you're in a melee matchup or in a ranged matchup. There are some matchups where Fleet of Footwork, you would want to run it even into some melee champions. Mostly that would be in the mid lane, but pretty much every single time if you're against a melee champion, Conquer is going to be better, and then if you're against a ranged champion, Fleet of Footwork is going to be better. Fleet of Footwork is more prominent in the mid lane, as there's more ways for you to take damage, and there's also more opportunities for you to trade, especially in the early levels. And then that's going to give you better value out of Fleet of Footwork because of the healing that's offered. And Yasuo also stacks up Fleet of Footwork pretty quickly because he's moving, he's dashing, and he's auto-attacking. With Conquer, the benefit of it is that you're building up attack damage with it whenever you're taking these small trades, and then as you're building up the Conquer stacks, and you're also building up your Tornado, and then you can ult them after building up the Tornado, and then you have the percentage armor pen, you have this attack damage built up, and then you're also healing for all the damage that you deal. And since you can deal AoE damage, that can become pretty impactful at later stages. And then since you're critting too, you just end up healing a lot more, especially in the mid game. So Yasuo's whole purpose is really to spike mid game, and you have the two options. Do you want to have more laning power of Fleet of Footwork, or do you want to have a way harder spike in the mid game with Conquer? But Fleet of Footwork can also get you to that spike in terms of itemization, because if you're winning lane with it, then you are just in a better spot because of it. So the default rune that I would recommend for Yasuo, if you're just looking for one, would be Conquer. With Conquer, it puts you in the precision tree. Again, with Conquer, your basic attacks and spells that deal damage to enemy champions grant you 2 stacks of Conquer for 6 seconds. The Conquer stacks will give Yasuo attack damage per level, and then since you're playing him in the mid lane, most likely, you're going to be getting the most levels in the game. Even if you're playing him top lane, you're going to be getting the second most levels in the game. So the amount of AD offered from Conquer is going to be stacking up pretty quickly. And then once Conquer is fully stacked at 10 stacks, you heal for 15% of the damage that you deal. That healing isn't super wild, but in combination with, let's say, double Doran's Blade, maybe Blade of the Rune King, or Bloodthirster, you can really start becoming really hard to kill, and having effective HP through the damage that you're dealing becomes really annoying for the enemy to have to deal with, especially if they don't have any burst in the enemy team comp. So something to consider, like when you'd be running Conquer. But you can also kind of see the theme where both of these keystones have healing, because if Yasuo doesn't have healing, it feels really bad for him, as if you just don't have effective HP to play with whenever you initiate a fight, then it's really hard for you to deal with, because once you go in, you're usually spending a bit of your HP whenever you're getting an ult, because most likely you're not getting a 5-man ult, so the single target that you're ulting, the entire enemy team is probably trying to turn on you at that point. And then once you land, it's important to have some sort of lifesteal or some sort of healing afterwards. For the secondary rune, you have good options in Overheal or Triumph. If you're running Fleet of Footwork, I think Overheal is completely fine, as you just gain access to another laning tool. With Overheal, excess healing on you becomes a shield for up to 10 plus 10% of your max health, and then the shield is built up from 20 to 100% of excess healing from yourself or an ally. So Overheal in combination with your passive shield just makes it so that the enemy has to get through more to actually damage your health pool, which is kind of the same concept. Whenever you're going in, you're spending your HP initially, probably. And even if you're in a 1v1, you're still spending your HP against the minion wave and then maybe a tower. So with Overheal, in combination with Fleet of Footwork, gives you a good trading tool. But if you're running Conquer, I think Triumph's going to be your better bet. With Triumph, takedowns restore 12% of your missing health and grant you an additional 20 gold. So where it's 12% of your missing health, that's really useful, because again, whenever you're going in, spending a lot of your HP, and then if you're killing one target, having the HP healed based on how much you're missing lets you stay in the fight and then stay relevant. Because once Yasuo is in a fight, he needs to be able to stay in it to really be useful. He can't go in and out and in and out. He really needs to just be able to stick onto them without dying, because that's really Yasuo's biggest weakness, is running out of HP. For the third rune, you have the option of attack speed, tenacity, or lifesteal. I think that attack speed is the best for Yasuo because he's so reliant on his Q cooldown, which is reduced by attack speed, and he's so reliant on the DPS from his auto attacks. You're going to be enabling the AD gain from Conqueror with the attack speed as well. You're also going to be enabling the crit chance, and then just basically your DPS with the attack speed a lot harder because of your build path and then because of Conqueror. And you don't need the tenacity. The tenacity is okay, but if Yasuo is getting CC'd, it's he just kind of has to deal with it. He can usually buffer his Q through it, or have his wind wall to block CC abilities whenever he's going in. With Bloodline, lifesteal is good, but Yasuo has enough healing already, and to miss out on this attack speed does feel pretty bad because you only want to be getting 2 attack speed items anyways in Berserker Greaves and Phantom Dancer. So with Alacrity, you basically get a skip out on building a dagger, but then you have enough attack speed, like a meaningful amount of attack speed to play with at like all stages of the game. For the fourth rune, your best bet really is Coup de Grace, even though Last Stand is like a pretty useful rune for a lot of champions that would use Conquer. I don't think Yasuo is one of them. Since Yasuo can always be pumping out damage through his auto attacks, Coup de Grace gains a lot of value because of that. With Coup de Grace, you deal 8% more damage to champions who have less than 40% health. A lot of what Yasuo's kit is initially getting someone low with his ult and then finishing them off with his auto attacks and his Q. And Coup de Grace is going to help you do that by giving you more damage on those. And since you could be getting this 8% damage increase on like 5 auto attacks, and that's pretty big. So really useful rune by amplifying your damage when it's most meaningful. With something like Last Stand, maybe in the top lane in some bruiser matchups it would be okay, but even then, I still think that Coup de Grace would be better, and just with the nature of how Yasuo's kit is, where he's basically like an ADC because he's just auto attacking and critting. So with Last Stand, you deal 5 to 11% increased damage while you're below 60% health, and then the max damage gained at 30%. So like, yes, you could get a higher percentage damage increase, but you do have to lose almost all of your health to do so. Yasuo might not even do that. You might go in and be full health the entire time and then just not have a damage increase. So, and then against every single type of champion, Coup de Grace is going to be best for you. A tank, a squishy champion, a bruiser, Coup de Grace is going to be best, so you don't have to worry about cut down or Last Stand. For the secondary runes, if you're playing into a ranged matchup, I think that Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter is your best bet. And then if you're playing into a melee matchup, I think Bone Plating and Overgrowth is your best bet. With Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter, Taste of Blood, pretty similar to Fleet of Footwork or Overheal, gives you an extra laning tool by giving you more effective HP. With Taste of Blood, you heal whenever you damage an enemy champion. The heal is based on your level and then is on a 20-second cooldown. So it's really, really useful in the mid lane, not really useful in the top lane. With Ravenous Hunter, you heal for a percentage of damage dealt by your abilities. You do have to stack this up. It's based on Bounty Hunter stacks. So every time you get a kill or assist on a unique champion, you get more percentage healing on your abilities. So that's going to count for your E and then your Q. And then also your ult, I suppose. So these two in combination, if you're playing in the mid lane and looking for more laning power, are really useful. Ravenous Hunter comes into play at later stages of the game, but also it's fine for Yasuo because you do spike really, really hard in the mid game, and then that's where Ravenous Hunter would really come online, so long that you're getting kills and assists throughout the game. And then having Taste of Blood just gives you more effective HP to play with in the laning phase. So if you're running Fleet of Footwork, Overheal, and Taste of Blood, you just have a lot more effective HP if you're playing into a ranged matchup in the mid lane. And then in the top lane, or if you're playing into a melee matchup, I think Conquer, Triumph, and then Resolve second with Bone Plating and Overgrowth is your better bet. With Bone Plating, after you take damage from an enemy champion, the next 3 spells or attacks you receive from them deal 30 to 60 damage less based on your level, and then is on a 45-second cooldown. So With bone plating, Yasuo isn't the best at using bone plating, but in melee matchups, it's not really that bad because whenever you go in, the enemy has to get through bone plating and your passive shield before they even start damaging you. And if they have the jump on you, you can still contend, and that's really, really important because if you don't have that shield and if you're not blocking that damage, then they are just out DPSing you before you can really turn onto them by building up your Conqueror stacks and your Q stacks. So bone plating becomes really, really useful in melee matchups for that reason. It's really good defensively, and then it's really good. It's best in a neutral situation where you would just trade one auto, they would hit you with one auto. You would trade your next auto Q, they would hit you with an ability in an auto. And then if you do that exact trade, you just have more HP because you have bone plating rather than not. With Overgrowth, you basically get HP for existing in the lane. You absorb life essence from monsters or enemy minions that die near you, permanently gaining 3 maximum health for every 8. Whenever you've absorbed 120 monsters or enemy minions, you gain an additional 3.5% maximum health. So this just gives you, again, more HP to play with and also helps you with your mid-game spike. And if you start building more HP items, maybe something like a Sterax or a Frozen Mallet, then Overgrowth could give you more effective HP, or just more effective HP, more actual HP. So usually it's giving you about a Ruby Crystal, but if you build those high HP items, maybe it could give you like 250 health or so. So I think it's really, really simple. Conquer, Triumph if you're playing into melees with Bone Plating Overgrowth, and then Taste of Blood, Ravenous Hunter with Fleet of Footwork and Overheal if you're playing into ranged champions. As these are just the most effective runes. With something like Second Wind, even if you're playing into a ranged matchup, Second Wind, it's really, really hard for Yasuo to use because of his passive shield, so he does lose like almost all the value that's in this rune against those champions. He's also not a champion that uses Doran's shield that well because of that. So that is just really bad for him. Almost everything in the inspiration tree is bad for Yasuo. The cooldown reduction isn't useful because his cooldowns are basically based on his attack speed. Having 5% isn't really going to change the W or E cooldown. Something like Perfect Timing and then Dematerializer doesn't really make any sense. Sorcery Tree could be useful, or you could have Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm, but you have enough scaling in your itemization, and that's really where you need to get it too, because if you're not critting on Yasuo, then you're not winning. So even if you could get extra attack damage from the runes, you're better off having your scaling through your itemization and then having laning tools to help you get to that point. So yeah, something like Sudden Impact also wouldn't be that useful, even though you can make use of the lethality and the magic penetration in the early game. This isn't going to make or break things in the laning phase and really give you any meaningful damage that would change a lethal or not. So even though it might sound like a good rune on Yasuo, it's really not. And that's really the only variations I can think of. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Yasuo runes. If this video helped you, leaving a like on the video helps me. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Please subscribe, or else, you know, I don't really think any of these other keystones are even worth mentioning. Like, briefly, Press the Attack isn't as good because even though you could burst someone with Press the Attack, you're going to be bursting them the exact same with Conquer because the way Yasuo dishes out things. You also have very high DPS, and Conquer enables that and Fleet of Footwork enables that, where you could stay on a target and keep hitting them or be hitting harder with Conquer. With Press the Attack, it might help you in a 2v2 situation, but just becomes really bad as you have no healing as well. Kind of the same thing with Hell of Blades. Hell of Blades becomes really bad because then it's like, what is your secondary runes here? Like, you lose all the laning tool in, like, all the value out of, like, say, Bone Plating and Overgrowth if you don't have Conquer, if you have Hell of Blades instead. And then if you have Hell of Blades, you'd have to have, like, Coup de Grace and then, I suppose, Triumph secondary. And then the extra rune in the Domination tree, like, just gives you attack damage one way or the other through placing wards, clearing wards, or getting kills and assist. And getting the attack damage from any of these isn't really that useful. And with Hell of Blades as well, it takes more than 3 auto attacks to kill a champion for Yasuo. So even if you could just E onto the enemy and then auto, like Pyke just does that better, which is a joke. So it becomes really, really bad for Yasuo. And where you don't have the healing and the sustained DPS, you just become a worse champion. Something like Grasp also doesn't work that well either because of Yasuo's shield. Kind of the same thing as Doran's shield in Second Wind. And then Unsealed Spellbook, nope, not seeing it. Glacial Augment, maybe. If they made a crit item that slowed. And then Omnistone, whack, already. Like, favorite, subscribe, rate me 5 stars on MySpace, recommend me to your mom for coaching. Links in Discord information in the description. My JPEG of myself is in the description. Check it out.